psychosocial hazards have exactly the same legal standing as physical hazards. Here's what most businesses don't actually understand about the new psychosocial hazards laws. So you might have seen my post that went viral yesterday. Approximately 1.5% of the Australian population saw it, and I got inundated with hundreds of messages, many from business owners that had no idea they had a legal obligation to get on top of their psychosocial hazards and management plan, or they're at risk of breach of the WHS Act, which could land them personally criminally liable for any breaches that have severe consequences. So I'm here to break down for businesses, what does it actually mean for you? What do you need to do? Not nice to do, requirement, mandatory, or you are in breach of the Act and you line yourself up for breach of the Act fines, prosecution, all the way up to criminal liability. Point one is you need to have a system and a process in place for identifying psychosocial hazards in your workplace. It needs to cover everybody in the business, including yourself. That might be identifying things like poor work control, meaning people have no control over the type of work that they perform, when it's performed, where it's performed. So if you're someone who runs a business and you've forced everybody into the office, even though there was a high likelihood they can do a lot of stuff from home, look out, because you're going to get hit with breaches, because you'll have to have a very good reason why you're forcing people to the office and removing their control over their work. So you need to have a system and a process in place for identifying hazards, just like you would a trip hazard or a physical hazard within your office space. Point number two is you have to have a methodology for assessing the risks of those hazards. Just like physical hazards, you need to find out how severe is this? What is the potential impact of this? What is the damage that could potentially happen? So number one, you've got to identify the hazards and have a method for doing that. Number two is you have to perform a risk assessment. For most businesses, you will need to keep a risk register, just like you do for physical risks. Third, you need to have a method of control for risks that you have deemed an actual hazard in the workplace, meaning you have to do something about it. In particular, you have to be more active when it comes to incidents that have been reported or hazards that have been reported. Again, this is exactly the same as physical hazards, and that is what this new regulation reflects. Psychosocial hazards have exactly the same legal standing as physical hazards, so you need to follow the exact same procedure. Identify the hazards, assess the risk of that hazard, and then have things to control or mitigate that risk. In best case scenario, you remove that risk entirely. But as far as, remember the wording here, it's the same as the physical side of the Act, is you have to do whatever is reasonably practicable to remove or reduce the impact of that hazard. So you must have a control mechanism in place. And the final thing, point four, is that you have to have an active review process of those first three elements. You have to actively review, are we identifying hazards correctly? Are we assessing the risk in an effective manner? Are we doing something about it? And in particular, when a hazard has been identified by our staff, are we actioning something and are we monitoring the results? And as I mentioned before, this is no longer a nice to have recommendation. This is a need to have mandatory. It covers every single state and territory in Australia except for Victoria, and their adoption of the Code of Practice starts on the 1st of December. What does this actually mean for businesses, and what should you do about it? You must create a plan for this. You must develop a system for this. It is mandatory. I've got it on good authority that there's been 150 new inspectors put on just in New South Wales alone, and they are training them up in prep for a 2026 Blitz. So they will very well come knocking on your business door and ask you of written evidence of your psychosocial hazards and risk management plan. And if you don't have that, expect to be held liable. And as I mentioned, these laws, these regulations that have been adopted formally, mean that the physical and the psychosocial have exactly the same legal ramifications. Any business owner that is watching this should already know what that is, but if you don't know what it is, you can look at the link that I've sent below. You can hit me up for an info pack. I sent out about 1,200 of them in the last 24 hours, a free info pack with a free psychosocial hazards and risk assessment tool built into it. Keep in mind that if you didn't know me, I am Dr. Mitch. I am the managing partner for Unveil, and we do have a dedicated service for psychosocial safety hazards management. So if you're interested in that because it's too hard to do yourself, let me know. You can slide into my DMs, click the links below, and I can get in contact with you. But a reminder that if you do nothing about this, you are at risk of breach. Just like if one of your staff members tripped and fell down a hazardous set of steps, you would be held liable, especially if it had already been flagged as a hazard and you did nothing about it. The exact same thing now applies to psychosocial hazards. This is no longer a nice to have, it is a need to have.